We're in the gate, and we are off. Much like the tractor out there on the inner track, the track maintenance crew doing its job, and we're doing our jobs here in our second-floor clubhouse studios here at the Big A. Glad you're with us on this edition of the Racing Report. Andy Serling, Richard Migliore, Jason Blewitt, ready to go. Some big names, 10 races and 5 tracks. We've got a lot to cover.
Yeah, I think it's sort of similar to what we're going to have a lot this winter when we're going to show races from Gulfstream and Santa Anita. And we saw some nice 3-year-old debut, a horse Calculator, who is no longer perhaps the best maiden in the country.
Yeah, interesting that he was a maiden this long, but I think it speaks volumes to the competition he was running against.
I agree.
We'll talk about the competition. We'll cover the races at Gulfstream Park, Fairgrounds, Tampa Bay, and Santa Anita as well. But let's start here with the Big A, in fact, as we get back to the Ruthless Stakes, which is over a week old at this point, run on January 4th, last Sunday. Good finish in this race in a field of 5 and 3-year-old fillies.
You know, I don't want to knock the winner because she's done absolutely nothing wrong, and Michelle Nevis done a great job with her and gets a sensational ride by Rod Ortiz, saving all the ground. I was very impressed, Richie, with the runner-up in here who's third right now because she was a runoff in her first start that got very green and bore out. And in this race, she was able to rate comfortably, she was wider, and she also behaved herself.
She really behaved herself, but she had a horse to focus on. When she got by herself in her maiden race, she got very erratic through the stretch. Well, she was focused on Paula Silverline, the eventual winner, and they put on quite a show.
They did, and Noble and a Beauty is the runner-up who actually finished second in this record race, I should say, for Rick Fowler. She's swinging 3 wide, but you see the winner, Paula Silverlining, as you said, sitting in the pocket, and she'll slip through down inside.
She's been a very opportunistic horse that has taken advantage of situations and gotten great rides. Jose Ortiz, I think, rode her at Belmont when he got a great ride to win the Matron, and she's obviously that kind of filly where she adapts circumstance. Noble and Beauty is a true homebred for Len Riggio and My Meadowview Farm in that he raced the sire, who unfortunately passed away, and he raced the dam as well. She's a good horse.
She's a very good horse. Obviously, trips made the difference here. One filly saving all the ground. But I also think that Paula Silverlining creates her own trips because, like you said, she's very adaptable to different situations. She's handy, and she's very responsive to the rider's cues. And you could see Jose Ortiz on Noble and Beauty was trying to be careful not to hit the front too soon. And when Paula Silverlining slipped through, then he had to go after her.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting comment. And also, it's easier, I think, to be the outside horse, even though she lost more ground. I'd always sort of, unless you have a gold rail, which we didn't have on this card, it's nicer to be on the outside. They're two good horses, and Paula Silverlining, she shows how good it is to have enough speed to always put yourself in the game, but be very comfortable rating and rating behind horses and rallying inside of horses.
How about Vincent Scuderi, who's got the mare, a daughter of Grindstone named Seeking the Silver. She's already foaled a Grade 1 winner for Vinny in Dad's Caps. And I remember you talking to him post-race after winning actually the stake at Belmont Park with Paul Silverlining. And it was really a snapshot of what the game could do for you, how excited he was.
Well, how excited he was to, just have a hand, first of all, in the planning of the mating, and then be able to have the mare and create this little bit of a factory of good horses. But I think back to Vinny Scuderi and when he was just having claiming horses with Pete Ferriola years ago and what he's developed into, and a guy that's been a huge supporter of the game.
No, absolutely. And he's also a big fan of the game. You see him at Belmont all the time, see him in the box areas. He's somebody who's here a lot, and as you say, he's been around for as long as I've been coming to track in New York, which is over 30 years.
And the Ortiz boys, who combined to win well over 500 races on this circuit last year, won 2 in a good stretch battle. Let's get down to Gulfstream Park. A few races to cover from Saturday's card. They ran 3 stakes, none more important than the House Hope. We've got this goofy start in these one-turn mile races, but we do have a good field in the return of Lee.
You know, I'm very curious, Richie's take on Lee's performance. I felt like it was a bit of good and bad because he showed, first of all, the most important thing, Richie, is he came back. He hadn't run since the dawn, and he came back off a layoff and ran very well. This race got a 106 buyer. It's a very good race. So that's the most important thing. But while he got in some trouble and some traffic, he's a professional racehorse. He did have a lot of things go well for him, too, saving ground behind horses.
I agree with all of that, but he really should have gotten beat yesterday because he had to accelerate, and they didn't go very fast early, and his momentum didn't have an opportunity to build into the momentum is the best way I could say it. He kind of had to steady off heel, swing out, and then for him to catch his stride and do what he did, I thought was impressive.
And let me interject, he did it at Gulfstream Park. I mean, once you straighten away, you've got 3/16 of a mile to really, with that straightaway run. I thought it was a very good effort.
Yeah, no, you guys are both right. And you'll see it in this race, he's got a very fast acceleration. He gets into stride extremely quickly, and that's rare, and that's one of the reasons he's as talented as he is. I criticize Joe Bravo for making premature wide moves quite frequently, and it seems as though he did a bit here. I don't think he had much choice, Richie. I think he was just more of a victim of circumstance.
You know, also also you're trying to get going forward to kind of keep that wall together. You don't want it to spread and then he slips through and now you're wide going nowhere. So if you can get the jump on him and keep those guys together, now he has to swing out the way he did and run you down.
Except, I guess, and this is just in hindsight, I really don't think this was Joe's fault. I guess you could also argue if he had looked at the situation and realized it was Lee behind horses, maybe if he makes that move a little bit slower and more gradually, he can keep Lee locked in and he can keep him there and keep him on his flank so he's actually able to beat him. You know, and if he had done that, though, I'm still not sure that he gets by prayer for relief because he only beat that one by a nose, so maybe he's second anyway.
Right. But you know, it's a fine balance when a rider has to, you want to keep that horse blocked, but at the same time, you're watching the guys in front of him, and if they start to drift, you're not next to them to hold them together. So you're playing kind of the middle, and it didn't work out this time only because Lee was that good.
No, I agree with you. I thought it was a terrific race. It's nice to see him back, and we'll see if he can duplicate his Don win from that last year.
Does Bill Mott, granted he's in the Hall of Fame, does he ever stop impressing? He gets good horses, and he's a top-class horseman, but to have Lee off that long layoff dating back to the Don, to be that good on Saturday, to win the way he did, just perfection.
I'll tell you what I think is funny about Bill Mott. He's got this reputation, I think, as being a turf trainer. He's had a lot of great success in the turf. I think he's a better trainer with dirt horses.
You know, I would tend to agree with that. You think about Cigar, obviously, but one thing I find funny, a lot of trainers can get a horse ready off a layoff, but you'll see some fast works in there. Bill Mott has the uncanny ability to get a horse ready off of layoffs without having to have them work fast. And I think that's an art form.
Amazing trainer.
He is, and we'll see Liam's map against Lee hopefully down the line in the February 7th Don handicap. As we stay down at Gulfstream Park, we will head to the turf and we'll look at the meet's leading trainer Todd Pletcher and the meet's leading rider Javier Castellano with MARSHUA'S, who drifts wide. In fact, he's right in front of the Gray's approval.
Yeah, Richie, did you think this was aggressive herding by Javier? I'm not really sure what it was, but it didn't really matter because the horse almost beats him, comes inside of him.
No, I think Javier Castellano had his hands full. This horse was trying to get out. He actually tried to get out at the half-mile pole and ran into a horse. And he straightened up once they were on the straightaway, but he had a very hard time negotiating the turns. I don't think it was on purpose.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like it was one of those things. And don't forget, he finishes well ahead of ZA approval. You know, I don't want to harp on this too much, but why was ZA approval moved out of Christophe Clements' barn? I mean, with all due respect, Christophe has done a great job with this horse, and they say he wants firm turf, and he's better suited to California campaign, and Mark Cassey has horses in California. First of all, we mostly have firm turf in the summer in New York, but second of all, they're in Florida, right?
Yeah, and also the fact of the matter is he's a 7-year-old that's been in Christophe Clements' barn for a very long time, and as good a trainer as Mark Cassey is, he's not familiar with this particular horse and all his little idiosyncrasies. And as a horse gets older, they do have different little idiosyncrasies.
And I'll tell you something, if I'm Mark Cassey, I don't want this horse.
Tough spot to be in.
Tough spot. I mean,
he's always been an overachiever for Christophe.
Yeah.
Is he really going to get this horse over the top and win a Grade 1? Well, if he does, it'll be his first Grade 1 grass win.
Absolutely, and he's a gelding. He's 7 years old. I'd like to take him home when he's done.
No, he's a good-looking horse, and Christophe has actually trained just about everybody in the family, but keep us in the loop with what you do if you get ZA approval down the line. But MARSHUA'S, who seems to be getting good at Gulfstream Park, a horse that came to this country with a nice resume out of town.
He did, and he's gotten better down there, and we'll see where he can progress from there. This race worked out very well for him. Things will get a little bit tougher maybe in the Grade 1 race on Don Day.
Yep. Yeah. All right, we stay with speaking of Christophe Clement, we'll get to his perfect trip winner, Paranda. You would, in the future, hope all your turf bets, all your wagers on the grass get the ride that John Velasquez, red cap sitting in the pocket, puts forth with Paranda, who had everything her own way and exploded.
She's helped by her post, but she's not dissimilar to the horse you talked about earlier. She has enough speed that she can wire fields, and she can sit and rate behind horses, so she makes her own good trips. And Christophe Clement lost ZA approval, but he got Paranda for this race. You lose a good one, you get a good one.
Well, it's interesting, too. She's a 6-year-old mare, and, you know, so
I get parties for him.
Right, you live by the sword, you die by the sword, but I think one thing comes to mind out of this. Johnny Velasquez doesn't ride a tremendous amount for Christophe Clement, but he seems like when he does, he wins.
Well, you know, it's interesting. He rode him in the Long Island Handicap, and he hadn't ridden him on horses. And I remember talking to Christophe about it, and he was very impressed how Johnny came in the paddock, and he said to him, I know I got to beat, I know where I have to be, I know I have to do this, I have to do that. And obviously it worked out, so you feel he's particularly smart, but I think he was very impressed by how professional he was coming into the paddock, and maybe you'll see him on more horses for him.
Well, a guy doesn't win that many races and get in the Hall of Fame without preparation.
And one more thing on Christophe. You mentioned Liam's map running against Lee. Well, Christophe's going to bring Tonalist back in the Don as well. So the Don's shaping up as a pretty terrific race right now.
Absolutely. And Christoph, thanks to Tonalist and his top barn and, of course, his world-class horseman skills, he's coming out of his best year ever. $9 million plus in purse money won last year, 10th in the nation, his best finish. We'll see what he could do in 2015. As we take a little breather on the show, Bob Baffert, Calculator, the 3-year-olds out on the West Coast. Stay tuned on the Racing Report. Back from Aqueduct Racetrack, that inner track in tip-top shape. We start a new week here this coming Wednesday. We're glad you're with us on the Racing Report. It's the Mig, Andy, and Jason, our clubhouse studios at the Big A. And let's get out to Santa Anita, guys. We'll get back to Gulfstream Park in a few moments, but we'll pick up the first of 2 graded stakes run out there this past Saturday, beginning with the latter of the stakes on the card, the San Pasquale Opportunity, a perfect trip winner.
He was a opportunistic winner, as I said on Twitter, of this race. And is it just me, Richie, or does it seem like this is the week of horses coming up the inside?
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like they've got Easy Pass, which I don't have anymore. But he knew Big Casanova, the horse on the lead, is going to drift out at Martin Garcia with Opportunity. Martin Garcia rides well. He does well. He doesn't ride as well for anybody else other than Bob Baffert. It's like his confidence level soars because Bob Baffert believes in him.
Well, that may very well be true. And I'll tell you something about this horse, Richie. I know he was the heavy favorite. He was 4-5. He earned his money, Martin Garcia. Excuse me, he had to ride this horse pretty much the entire way. He may just be that kind of racehorse. This race actually came back with a lower figure in the 3-year-old race we're going to see a little bit later. Some may think the track slowed up late. Obviously, Beyer did not. The rail was good. He got a great trip. This is a workmanlike performance, as you like to say, Jay, and I think Bob Baffert will be very selective in where he puts this horse going forward. It'll be interesting to see what spots he put him in, because he already got his Grade 1 in winning the Clark.
Right, he's got his Grade 1, and he's got other horses to fill in those other divisions, so he can kind of shop around with this horse and place him properly. And there's plenty of big money around if you duck in the heavy heads.
And also with the big cap, if all these guys go out to Dubai, he could end up being the big dog in there. Now, probably Shared Belief stays behind, doesn't go to Dubai. We'll see what happens. If not, Baffert will be there to try to take advantage of that.
Yeah. Well, now, speaking of the Dubai World Cup, that is the main target, at least early on in 2015, for Bayern, who was announced through Jay Pridman in the racing form. Guess he's battling a quarter crack and missed a workout on Saturday. And it sounds like his participation in the San Antonio may be in jeopardy.
Yeah, no, it feels like it'll be the big 2, not the big 3. Hopefully he gets back. Maybe he does make it, or he makes it somewhere else. We'll see. If he has issues, sometimes that can last a lot longer.
It's very tough, too, to predict with quarter cracks which way they go. You know, certain different little injuries, you can say, well, this horse needs 2-3 weeks, what have you. With a quarter crack, you never know. It's very unpredictable.
In horse racing, 2 to 3 weeks means 6 to 7 months. Far too often.
We hope that's not the case for a world-class talent, a finalist for Horse of the Year, and a finalist for 3-year-old champion as well. Let's stay out at Santa Anita, though, and we check out the 3-year-olds, as you guys were talking about at the top of the broadcast. The nation's best maiden, no longer. Dominating performance from the gray Calculator.
He got a good trip with a quick pace, but he was 3 wide the entire way around the racetrack. He may not have beaten any monsters. He is flattering that group out there of Texas Red and American Pharoah. My question, though, is, was American Pharoah able to get very good trips? And it's the horses behind him that are starting to get the better trips than the ones they had behind him, and maybe they're better than him.
Well, it's an interesting point, and also how much they change from 2 to 3. Horses, you know, continually change and get better. This horse is impressive, and like you said, I mean, it just flatters. You think about those races, American Pharoah, Texas Red. Now, this horse, it's interesting to me, too. He's by insummation, but he's out of an alphabet soup mare. I see more alphabet soup, so maybe he won't have distance limitations.
He doesn't look like he has distance limitations. Right. And, you know, we have some nice horses we've seen in the East Coast, and we're going to see them in Florida. But right now, you talk about this horse and Texas Red in California, and theoretically American Pharoah. They've got a very strong hand out there with their horses. American Pharoah, though, I don't think he's worked yet. I'm getting a little bit dubious of whether we're going to see him in the Triple Crown races.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting because now the clock is ticking. You really don't have as much time as you think.
No, absolutely not. I mean, if they're going to get him started even late and have 2 preps and get their first prep the first weekend in March, let's say, you think he should be working by middle of January.
Yep. Yeah, you need foundation. It's all about foundation.
And that was Elvis Trujillo, by the way, with the fist pump and the winning ride aboard Calculator for trainer Peter Miller. And Richard Pell, who got close to a Travers victory a few summers back with Fly Down. He's the winning owner.
Yeah, I like Richie. We see him around the Big A. In fact, we saw him a couple weeks ago, and it's nice to see him doing well and has a big horse.
14 Kentucky Derby points for Calculator. As we say goodbye with the second segment down, we set our sights on a very fast turf sprinter down at Tampa Bay. Look at Equestrius, at one time New York City's largest restaurant, and we hope you join us here at the Big A. We're back at it this coming Wednesday with the first race post at 12:25. We've got our own little pick four remaining on the show. We make a couple trips to tracks we haven't covered yet on tonight's broadcast. Tampa Bay Downs and Fairgrounds, and let's get out there for the Turf Dash, at least down to the west coast of Florida, as we look at one fast sprinter, Bold Thunder, a new course record going 5/8 and 54.63.
He went fast early, he went fast late. The horse I want to talk about, though, Richie, will test your memory a little, is coming from about 7th on the outside in the Green Silks, and that's the second finisher, Green Mask. A horse, Richie, that you and I did on Trips and Traps, that Clement has, that Wesley Ward ends up, that Clement had, Wesley Ward has him now, and he's a horse that had to be kept sort of in traffic and trouble before he got himself out in the stretch to win a race midway through the year.
Yes, and actually I had a conversation with Christophe about him, that he was the kind of horse that wins going 6.5 down the hill because they go fast, and he ran out of ground. I mean, the winner is just fast. I mean, when they run that fast, you expect them to collapse. He did not collapse.
The value of speed in these turf sprints, 5 furlongs, he's been as far as 6. You cannot argue against it. And a more talented horse that comes from way back, like Green Mask, gives up such an advantage. And I'm not knocking Bold Thunder. He's a very good horse. This was Green Mask's first race back, and it's interesting, they gelded him before this race. And I mean, this is a horse that I don't think it was a desperation move. He was a bit of a bad actor, and maybe they're hoping it'll settle him down.
Yeah, well, exactly. Change his attitude, change how difficult he is to handle, and certainly in these kind of sprints, he's not going to pull the way he did going like a mile at Belmont Park.
It'll be interesting to see Wesley Ward, who can run a horse anywhere in the country or the world.
Yes.
We'll see if he's interested in bringing him out to California, look for a turf sprint.
No, that horse's Paradise Creek win last Preakness Day at Belmont was very good. I hit the pick 5 that day. Probably the last ticket I cashed. That was a long time ago. Let's get on to the action at Fairgrounds. We look at an old mare, 6-year-old daughter of Broken Vow, 1-5 favorite. She's just a good horse, and her name is Good Deed.
Yeah, this is a horse. I just wanted to make sure that she was on Jason's radar, because this is the kind of horse that you like. Yeah, I know. She's getting a very nice trip in here, and she's cruising on the front end. This horse can run. She actually ran a 110 buyer in a turf sprint, I believe, at Churchill Downs last year.
And just look how confident Brian Hernandez is. I mean, he's just kind of sitting there. He's not even setting her down. They're inside the 8th pole. And years ago, you could not win on the lead at Fairgrounds. It seems like you can win on the lead on the turf at Fairgrounds.
Yeah, when they get their turf and they've got the new turf course in, it looks a lot better, actually, and I'm glad to see it's going well out there. But this is a very, very nice turf sprinters, and sometimes you want to give a little love to these horses. We don't get that many chances to see them.
No, newly turned 6-year-old daughter, again, of a Broken Vow, out of a Mount Livermore dam, who's now 9 for 16 in her career. Steve Margolis, the trainer, and Brian Hernandez Jr. up.
Yeah, I'm just curious, and you guys would have a better handle on this. Statistically, horses turf sprinting, speed wins more often, or horses coming from off the pace?
I would say speed. I don't have the numbers to back it up, but all I know is that I used to spend a lot of time looking for closers in those races, thinking about how turnbacks work in dirt sprints. They don't work in turf sprints. You've got to be adept at turf sprinting, and a lot of the best ones seem to have speed.
Right, particularly 5.5, 6. I mean, 6.5 down the hill is a different animal completely. Yeah.
Well, that's more of a specialist thing, but I even look at the races going 5, 5.5, or even the 5.5 furlong sprints upstate at Saratoga. Though it's like a specialist race, too. You want to have a horse that's had prior success at that distance.
Absolutely. You always have to try to find. You want to be cute in there and find somebody to price, that's fine. But you're playing multi-race bets. Use the first 2 best turf sprinters you can find and hope you're right.
Top connections and a well-bet first-time starting 4-year-old filly by Curlin, who turned some heads and grabbed some headlines last Wednesday down at Gulfstream Park as we get out there for Wednesday's 3rd race. Her name, Wind Racer. She was odds-on, and she gets a very fast figure in her debut for Stone Street and Marty Wolfson.
Now, obviously, to debut, even though it's very early in the year, as a 4-year-old, she's a horse with issues. But, Richie, talk about this trip for her. She's a very promising horse.
She's very promising. Didn't break great, got steadied back there, trying to get up in there. And then you don't know how they're going to react to the kickback. I mean, she answered a lot of questions in this race. And interesting, I used to ride the mother for John Kimmel, a Meadow Lake filly, Dignified Diva. She looks exactly like the mother.
Well, I tell you something. This is a nice performance. You say she also didn't get discouraged. Sometimes a horse will get steadied like that and get discouraged. You say gets a little kickback and goes, I've had enough, especially a first-time starter. She was unfazed by all of it, gets out in the clear, and she rolls. This is a fast race.
Well, and the thing is, obviously, she had ability the way she was bet and her workouts, but the thing you don't know until they actually do it is overcoming that adversity, getting hit with that kickback, getting steady. In the mornings, it's a lot more controlled environment. In the afternoons, they've got to overcome some things.
She's rolling. She's a little green. She ducks in a little bit there, but nothing that major. She's a promising horse. I hope she can stay sound.
Yeah, Shin's, I think, the reason why she missed so much time, or at least that was the on-the-record reason for Marty Wolfson.
The nonsense they spewed as to why she wasn't at the races until she was 4.
You hope she stays sound, whatever it is, because when that little duck in she did, there was more a function of her changing leads awkwardly, so maybe she's just a little bit hard on herself.
Well, hopefully that won't continue, and I think that's probably the case, and you've seen it yourself with a lot of these very fast sprinters. They're fast, and they're hard on themselves, and they're running them. That's why it's tough to keep them sound.
And let's just add, we hope to see another high-profile Curlin Firster, owned and bred by Stone Street, make his debut in Jess's Dream, who it looks like, I was looking last night, he's up to breezing 5/8 down in Florida. It sounds like he's getting closer to a race.
Here he's looking good down there, so it'll be very exciting when he comes to that's Rachel Alexander, of course, the dam.
Yes.
Yeah, and I actually spoke with Kieran McLaughlin about Jess's Dream, and he says he's ready. He just want to do a little bit more gate work, but physically he's fit to run.
I hope we don't hear his buck shins. We might not see him till he's 4.
No, we hope that's not the case. And speaking of horses coming back at 4, Commissioner, who, remember when, was second in the Belmont Stakes, nearly won the 3rd leg of the Triple Crown at a huge price last June for Todd Pletcher. He returned 3rd race Saturday down at Gulfstream.
He actually ran very well to be 3rd because he looks like he's dead beaten. But, you know, I watched this race with Dave Grenig of the Daily Racing Form, and right here he looks like he's going to be 3rd beaten a pole, and he said it's Todd down in Florida. He'll probably come back and win. He doesn't, but, man, he fights it out gamely.
Yeah, he just kept fighting. He came off the turn. He was already on his right lead around the turn, and I wonder if he just didn't get to wandering a little bit, but we talk about it a great deal. Todd's horses seem to keep finding air down at Gulfstream.
No, he's got to do it up here, but he did do it in the Belmont Stakes, and I think one of the keys with him, and this is one of the reasons that Todd's successful as he is, he's very smart, and he's willing to try new things. This is a grinder-type horse that didn't have the acceleration, I think, to make big moves and win races. So they've decided to try to ride him more aggressively and put him in the game early because he can grind it out. And that's his best chance to beat. It doesn't mean he's going to beat horses, but if he's going to beat good horses, he's not going to do it from 6, 7 lengths behind because he doesn't have the acceleration.
Well, he doesn't have a turn of foot, but he does have a cruising speed, so it makes other horses work to stay with him. You've got to play to a horse's strengths, use their weapons.
And you've got to find their strengths. And that's the other thing. You have to be willing to be adaptable. Sometimes what you're doing with a horse maybe isn't the right move, and it's not the horse, it's the running style, and if you change it, sometimes you get lucky.
Let's talk about Ian Wilkes and the winner though. Ulaanbaatar ran well at Saratoga last summer.
No, was it? It was last summer that he was the horse that finished behind
Travers,
VD and the Jim Dandy. Actually had a bit of a trip and could have won that race.
Right, and I think came back in the Travers. I mean, this is a horse that was pretty good as a 3-year-old, and just like that, awfully wild, starting to throw some horses, Bayern and Ulaanbaatar, and now he's standing in Turkey. How about that?
Yeah, absolutely. But, you know, Ulaanbaatar also, I think, was second to Matt Wynn at Churchill Downs. We'll see where they go from here. I mean, theoretically, this is a prep for the Don. Whether or not they want to take a shot, maybe they will. It's going to be a lot tougher.
I think he's an interesting horse because I thought he had the look last year of a horse that could develop more. He had that tough trip in the Jim Dandy. And you guys talk about the sire off while he's in Turkey. He doesn't care. He doesn't care if they're Turkish mares or U.S. mares.
Now, no, North Korea is where 'Tis Wonderful is, right?
Right, North Korea.
Well, he might care.
He might care. As we say goodbye, we thank you. We certainly care that you joined us on this edition of the Racing Report. It's time to say goodbye, guys. Always a good time talking the ponies with you. The Ortiz boys, Michelle Nevin, white hot these days here at the Big A, and we'll see you back Wednesday with the first race post of 1225.